The Dream SMP is a private Minecraft server hosted by the YouTuber Dream, where some friends goof around and roleplay. Something that most of us, or at least I have, fond memories of doing. So this would come as a huge shock that it's currently one of the biggest events in the gaming world on YouTube. But does that really come as a shock? The Dream SMP has outlasted Call Me Carson's SMP Live and Wilbur Soot's SMPEarth for two very specific reasons. The first reason is a bit niche, and you may not have heard of it. It's causing a lot of people to be stuck inside and need stuff to watch. It's called the coronavirus. The second reason is it stopped existing as just a Minecraft server where popular content creators can say the haha funny while playing survival Minecraft. But now, as a storytelling device with carefully planned out plot arcs and deep world building.
Eret, listen to me, and I mean this in the nicest way possible. You f***ed up.
But that got me thinking, what storylines were left untold? Which characters kind of just appeared in the story without backstories, and how could we explain canon events, referencing videos by creators in the SMP from outside of the Dream SMP canon? Allow me to introduce my headcanon for the untold story of every single person in the SMP. I've spent an upwards of 40 hours going through VODs, writing, editing, and compiling footage. So if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always unsubscribe later if you change your mind. I spent a lot of time on this video while also streaming and editing some more of my usual type of content in the meantime. With all that out of the way though, let's get started. It was really difficult getting canon to always line up when there are more than 20 individual people influencing their own stories and making their own character decisions, which are sometimes hard to work into canon when some are contradictory.
You're my son!
Is you being Phil's son still canon? No.
So, while I tried to abide by canon as much as possible, there's some things which are a bit more, absolute f***ing bullshit that I made up. For that reason, as to not cause any confusion, I'll have a green, orange, or red indicator in the top left of the screen over what's canon and what isn't. Green will mean this is a canon event that happened on the SMP. Orange means it's either potentially canon because of references, or at least actually as a basis in some videos or streams outside of canon, by creators in the SMP. And finally, red means it is entirely glorified fanfiction that I think is just cool from a storytelling point of view. This timeline will include an abridged version of events on the SMP because some tie deeply into character arcs from the backgrounds I've written, so this is your last chance to click off the video if you aren't caught up somewhat with the SMP and don't want any spoilers. Since you're still here though, I hope you enjoy the video. Our story begins in an Arctic village when Philza is born to undisclosed parents. Very little is known about this period of his life, besides that he had a peaceful childhood and that significantly contributed to his diplomatic and peace-seeking nature. Skip ahead several years, and Philza has had two kids with an undisclosed person. These two boys are named Technoblade and Wilbur. At some point, the person married to Philza either dies or leaves him. Too distraught to tell his kids, he lies to them and tells them that their mom is the fridge, so that they don't have to suffer the loss of their mother. Is what I would say if when he was the lead writer, Wilbur didn't have to keep f***ing insisting his mom was a Samsung fridge. Wilbur, what the fuck? After Philza Minecraft had sex with the fridge and gave birth to his pig son and his not pig son, in a distant land there was a devil who was known as BadBoyHalo, who was stripped of his devilhood for not being devil-ish enough. He was sent to live out the rest of his days in the mortal plane. Sometime after falling, he found a child who he adopted and named Sapnap. Back to Phil and Co. Philza always claimed to not have a favorite child, but very evident to most, especially Wilbur, his favorite was Techno. This caused Wilbur to feel like he always had to prove himself to his dad and try to one-up Techno in everything. When Phil was unable to care adequately for his two kids, he turned towards his estranged brother, Jschlatt, for help. Alright, hear me out before you click off the video if you haven't already after Phil f***ing a fridge was made canon. Do I have any evidence for Jschlatt being Phil's brother? None whatsoever at all. But it sets up several interpretations of the plot which I like a lot, so hold in there. I promise I'm not losing it. Jschlatt was a raging alcoholic and scam artist, but Phil needed help. Jschlatt helped take care of Wilbur and Techno growing up. During this time, Phil married his second wife. If she's also a fridge too is up to interpretation. To have a third child, Tommy. After Phil's second wife left him, he fell into a state of depression, where Jschlatt was the predominant caregiver for all three kids now, which had an adverse effect on their growing up. While Tommy was too young to remember being cared for by Jschlatt, and Techno saw through his charm, Wilbur thought he finally found a friend and grew really close to Jschlatt over this time. This of course left Wilbur distraught when Phil finally began feeling well enough to take care of his kids again. He began to do so and all was fine for a while, until Jschlatt ended up accidentally having a kid he didn't intend to, and in a panic begged Phil to take him and to never tell him where he came from. Phil agreed to this out of a sense of gratitude for the months Jschlatt helped him. He told his new adoptive kid, Tubbo, that he was found on the streets in a box to spare him and his other kids from the truth. A short while after that, we meet an adventurer known only as Dream. Very little is known about him in his past, besides that he had the goal of exploring the entire world as fast as possible. On one of his adventures, he finds a temple. This temple is relatively unremarkable, besides this relic that existed there known as the Mask of the Dreamon. According to legend, a legend which Dream had obviously not heard, if someone were to put it on, it would permanently meld with their face in a painful process that gives them strength and abilities and an inability to ever truly die. All those who get close to the mask begin to be influenced by the Dreamon King, especially whoever's wearing the mask. The Dreamons are a subspecies of demons. In the real world, they're relatively harmless. However, in the subconscious world, a Dreamon holds complete power. If someone dies in their dreams to a Dreamon, they will die in the real world as well. Foolishly, Dream puts the mask on, thinking it's merely a useless trinket. When he becomes the Dreamon King, the mask also releases hundreds of thousands of Dreamons when activated. This catastrophic threat notifies the Dreamon Hunters, a group of highly trained individuals who had been mostly inactive since the mask was not a threat for years, and its location was not known. When they were notified of the next Dreamon War being kicked into place between humanity and the Dreamons, they immediately formed the Dreamon Hunter Army and began recruiting. The Dreamon Hunter Army's first act is to send 4 hunters to hunt down the new Dreamon King, Dream. The father and son duo, BadBoyHalo and Sapnap, returned from a time they spent living in the wilderness. George, a friend of Sapnap's from childhood, who was convinced to fight in the Dreamon War, and finally Antfrost. Very little is known about Antfrost other than that he's one of the last living shapeshifters. The only other known alive is his brother, Sam. And they said it couldn't be done! I made Manhunt canon!
I'm right here. I'm so close. Wait, what? He bolted off the edge!
Now let's jump back on over to the Sleepy Boys. After cracks start showing in Phil's family, each member starts splitting their own ways. Jschlatt becomes entrenched in alcoholism to deal with his stress and isolates himself. Feeling obligated to protect his family, Techno goes off to fight in the Dreamon Wars. On the other hand, to escape from the Dreamon Wars, Tubbo and Tommy go to live in a land in the sky known as Skyblock together, with this tying in their earlier content. And finally, Wilbur left for the distant land of Newfoundland to escape the Dreamon Wars, making some of his content on SMPEarth somewhat canon. During Wilbur's time in Newfoundland, he met Nikki, who was also trying to escape the Dreamon Wars. Technoblade went in the opposite direction when he heard of the Dreamon Wars. He begins his training in multiple battle simulations known as Blitz and Mega Walls. Okay, I understand this is kind of cringe, and also has no point in the story to make Blitz a canon event to the Dream SMP. This can totally just be ignored, but hear me out. This would make it completely canon for Technoblade to just start singing Blitz during canon events, and I think that would be very funny.
Getting bored of Walls 2.
As Techno gained a reputation for his skilled marksmanship, which can be attributed to his sparring with Wilbur as a child, he was sent out as one of the Dreamon Hunter Army's last lines of defense against the Dreamons. Another famous fighter in the Dreamon Wars is Purpled, who was renowned for his ability to outsmart the Dreamons. The Dreamon Wars may sound like any other war, but there was something very different about them. To fight the Dreamon, one must either exist on the astral plane outside of time, or fight them in their dreams. The warriors of the Dreamon Hunter Army and the Dreamons have infinite lives in this dreamscape as a result of these tethers each army has, which resembles beds, signifying their unconscious state in this world. The beds are the one thing holding their existence in the dreamscape together with reality. If a team's tether is destroyed and they aren't woken up in time by sergeants in the Dream Hunter Army monitoring their sleeping state, they will die permanently. So, yes, I did just make Bed Wars canon, and there's nothing you can do about it. By the conclusion of the Dreamon Wars, Technoblade had amassed 1,400 wins with 0 losses, making him hold the most impressive win rate of most generals in the war. This caused him to develop a god complex, believing himself to be unable to die.
Not even close, baby! Technoblade never dies!
To prove this, he allows a Dreamon to take his bed and jump off the world to prove he still cannot die. Before he's able to be proven wrong, a sergeant in the Dreamon Hunter army wakes him up barely in time. Let's check in on Green Boy for a second. Dream spent almost all of the Dreamon Wars running from the 4 hunters. When he realized the war was almost over, since the mask had been near the hunters for so long, they were influenced by the Dreamon King to stop hunting him and to manipulate them into trusting Dream and becoming his friends. Something he'd hate to admit, but something that he desperately needed after all those years. After all of his family had left on their separate paths, Philza left for the uncharted wilderness to be at ease with himself and tried coming to peace with all of the loss he suffered years prior to the Dreamon Wars. After spending multiple years there, he was subdued by a baby zombie.
No! Really? That's how I die? Oh my god!
And returned to visit his favorite son Technoblade after hearing the Dreamon Wars had ended. When Philza found Techno, he was a changed man. Damaged by war and needing entertainment following the Dreamon War, Techno began to formulate his plans for world domination, with his own empire started in his home village known as the Antarctic Empire. Now, let's take a step back for a moment, because you're probably thinking, Skios, you can't make SMPEarth canon. There's some very large plot holes and inconsistencies with the rest of the lore. And I completely agree. That's why I didn't include quite a few other events, such as SMP Live, because it was hardly referenced and Jschlatt played a completely different character.
I've spent the last 4 years looking for my ex-girlfriend's killer.
Or Fundy and Dream's wedding, which is something I really wanted to include, but there was nowhere in this timeline where it would actually make sense in canon. And Dream has expressly said it's separate from the SMP. And finally, Minecraft Championships. I tried really hard to fit that in, but it, again, didn't make sense anywhere in canon, and kind of ruined quite a few characters' plot arcs. If you really want to fit it in, though, you could always say it was a dream or something like that. But back to the original point, the difference with SMPEarth is that Philza brings up the Antarctic Empire a lot in canon, as well as Techno and Phil's new Dream SMP skins. For this reason, I'll be making the Empire itself canon and some other small events, but not the SMP as a whole. Let's get back to the plot though. After being convinced by Techno, Philza joins in with his plan for the Antarctic Empire. But after hearing of the plan, out of a sense of duty, Wilbur shows up to stop them by holding a trial to stop the Antarctic Empire's spread, which he's successful in, and Techno agrees to only rule over the Arctic. Even though the Empire is contained, Tommy goes to attempt to stop the Antarctic Empire from becoming too powerful, and attempting world domination once again. After leaving his and Tubbo's skybase, he tries destroying the railway, which allows the Antarctic Empire to travel to other continents. After a long fight between the two brothers, Techno began having doubt in his mind over ruling the Antarctic Empire, and decides to leave his home village to start a potato farm, to distract himself and retire. This allowed the Antarctic Empire to fall into ruin without its ruler. During Techno's time on his potato farm, he began to reject his time ruling an empire, and started reading anarchist literature in his free time. Now you might ask, Skios, does this make Squid Kid canon to the Dream SMP? And my answer to that is back when the Antarctic Empire was in its heyday taking power, Dream and his previous hunters left for uncharted land to attempt escaping Techno's Iron Fist. This land would become known as the Dream SMP. However, it had very few inhabitants. Some of the only inhabitants before the Dream Team arrived were a nomadic group of 2 who lived in the wilderness, with a past even they couldn't remember. This group consisted of Callahan and Alyssa, who were hiding from the Dreamon Wars, which they didn't know had ended. They became influenced by the Mask of the Dreamon, and helped Dream build his empire. A bounty hunter looking for work named Ponk showed up in the SMP, something there was very little need of without conflict. But not knowing how soon it would erupt, he helped Dream to build his empire. Antfrost invited his brother Awesomedo to join the SMP, who agreed. At some point, Punz moves into the SMP. Punz is motivated by a sense of justice after being pushed down for so many years of his life. Seeing Dream as the supreme form of justice in his own SMP, he holds him to a high regard and has great loyalty to him. Purpled soon followed in Punz's footsteps to the SMP as well, seeing this as a chance to finally retire after the Dreamon Wars had ended. Meanwhile, in the aftermath of the fall of the Antarctic Empire, Philza returned to the wilderness to live out his days in retirement. When Wilbur returned to Newfoundland, he met a shapeshifter named Sally, who frequently took the form of a salmon. who he fell in love with and ended up having a kid with. This kid was named Fundy, and he was also a shapeshifter, but never learned how to shift, so he was constantly stuck in the form of a humanoid fox, albeit with faster aging than that of a human. Shortly after giving birth to Fundy, Sally ended up permanently stuck in the form of a sapling, which Wilbur would always carry with him, which would eventually grow into a tree known as Laman Tree, and it would be a secret that he would take to his grave, always insisting Sally was a normal salmon. Is what I would say if Wilbur didn't keep insisting he fucked a fish. After Wilbur had sex with a fish, which gave birth to his furry trans son.
He's my furry trans son.
Who will age 21 odd years in less than a year. Tommy returns to Skyblock to meet back up with Tubbo. They both hear of the Dream SMP and, realizing they don't need to hide away from the Dreamon Wars anymore, think this is a great change of pace and move there. The Dream SMP lore's actually fucking started. Hell yeah! I spent
15 minutes
making this shit up. Let's go! I'll re-record that bit later. Now, I could do an in-depth history of what happened on the SMP, but, like, come on. You're watching a video about the background of Minecraft streamers' characters on a server. You're far enough in the niche meta of this server, you know what happened. So, for time's sake, I'll be heavily abridging the events, only focusing on things that have added meaning with my new backgrounds. If you really need a refresher though, my very serious summary of the entire history of the SMP, which contains 0 jokes, should be linked in the top right of the screen right now. However, let's move on. Shortly after Tommy and Tubbo arrive on the SMP, the disc saga takes place over the struggle for Tommy's discs. After deciding he had very little reason to stay in Newfoundland, Wilbur, along with his son, Fundy, decided to move into a newly started country by the elusive Dream. Wilbur was left very surprised to see his brothers Tommy and Tubbo already there. After realizing he can capitalize on the drug market, Wilbur attempts to sell drugs in the Camar van along with Tommy, before forming L'Manberg, which Dream is opposed to. A prince from a distant kingdom known as Eret was exiled from his own kingdom for betraying the king and attempting a coup. Dream sees this as a perfect opportunity to use Eret to start a coup of his own. After Eret joined the fight for L'Manberg, a final battle for independence broke out between L'Manberg and the Dream SMP, during which Eret revealed their true intentions and ended up siding with Dream.
Down with the revolution, boys! It was never meant to be.
When all hope seems lost for L'Manberg, Tommy secures independence by trading his discs. An old imp friend of BadBoyHalo, Skeppy, decides to move into the SMP with the express goal of causing as much chaos as possible. Hearing of L'Manberg's victory, an old childhood friend of Tommy and Tubbo's, Manifold, comes to visit L'Manberg and congratulate them on their new nation being formed. Before he can leave, however, Wilbur announces he's running for president of L'Manberg, and Manifold is roped into a political campaign, and decides to stay. In addition, Wilbur's new friend from Newfoundland, Nikki, comes to congratulate Wilbur and move into L'Manberg. Quackity is a conman and an old associate of Jschlatt's during his time off the map since we last saw him. Quackity arrives in L'Manberg to challenge Wilbur's unchallenged run for president. Karl Jacobs, an old well-meaning friend of Quackity, comes along as well. As all the new people immigrate to L'Manberg, a charismatic game show host, H-Bomb, joins in as he sees a perfect opportunity to capitalize on the newly formed nation, and promptly starts his own game show called Le Cast. When it comes to election day between Wilbur and Quackity, further divisions are made between Fundy and his father when he enters the race as well. As a last resort, Wilbur reaches out to his uncle, Jschlatt, the only one he's ever felt he could truly trust, to give an endorsement and help run his political campaign. Jschlatt instead starts his own campaign and pools votes with Quackity to win. After Jschlatt banishes Tommy and Wilbur,
is to revoke the citizenship of Wilbur, Soot, and TommyInnit.
Wilbur feels unable to trust anyone after being betrayed by his only friend for so many years. Jschlatt merely sees this as an opportunity to gain power and get closer to his son, Tubbo. He wouldn't dare actually tell Tubbo their relation out of shame for leaving him with Phil, but does give him more leeway than his other constituents. Wilbur and Tommy decided they wanted to overthrow Jschlatt and use Tubbo as a spy. Technoblade hears of the plan to overthrow Jschlatt, and after spending so much time on his potato farm, he comes to help his brothers. At some point, a rich benefactor decides to orchestrate a battle for his own enjoyment between Dream, the Dreamon King, and Technoblade, one of the strongest Dreamon hunters. Since the duel was merely for fun, both emerge alive and Technoblade emerges victorious. Fundy and Tubbo discover that Dream is possessed by a Dreamon, but not that said Dreamon is the Dreamon King. That knowledge was kept confidential in the highest levels of the Dreamon Hunter army back during the war. They attempt to exorcise him, and the Dreamon King is removed from Dream's body, but the mask is still permanently melded to his face. It's discovered shortly after that many other Dreamons are possessing other members of the SMP. although the only other known person so far is Ponk. Fundy and Tubbo form the new Dreamon Hunters and recruit Sapnap to their cause. Insert festival here. Pogtopia attacks Manberg, Jschlatt dies, Wilbur blows it all up, Wilbur dies, Techno summons Withers, you all know this. As L'Manberg begins its reconstruction, several newcomers come into the SMP. Connor is the first, an odd individual with a very mysterious background. Some say he's an old associate of Jschlatt's, some say he appeared out of thin air, but most assumptions are jokes, not that serious. After Eret's sister, Captain Puffy, was banished from their home kingdom after recommending peace talks with the Dream SMP because of Eret's kingship in the SMP, she's promptly granted asylum by Eret. One of Tommy's childhood heroes, Vicstar, along with his associate Laserbeam, a pair of traveling adventurers, see an opportunity to form a new nation near unclaimed land by L'Manberg and the Dream SMP to be able to gain political power. This nation becomes known as Boomerville. A traveler named Ronbu, who remembers nothing of his past, has short-term memory loss, and is blind, appears on the SMP after wandering in immediately with a plan to run for president of L'Manberg. Some believe him to know more than he lets on, but this mysterious character insists he remembers nothing of his past. I'm going to stop my recap here, because the plot arcs after this are still going on and active, so it has a much higher chance of being dated much sooner. I do want to quickly touch on this in the 1 in a million chance that Technoblade sees this video. I'm really sorry if the focus on the family dynamic was at all uncomfortable. I started writing this script before the stream where Sleepy Boy's family wasn't hard and fast canon.
I reject all of the family canon. That's weird. You guys, if you guys want to believe it's true, that's fine. But I don't.
Admittedly, writing for Techno and Phil just being close friends would have been significantly easier, but I was already halfway through this script before it became more of a headcanon. And additionally, in the also 1 in a million chance that anyone from the SMP ever sees this, I want you to know that every single one of you has been such a huge inspiration to me over the years, including outside of YouTube. I've been watching Minecraft YouTubers actively since 2016, and to be able to see creators from back then like Technoblade and Skeppy grow to where they are today, and to see new creators join in as well, has been such an experience. I mean this video to be a dedication to all the hours upon hours of enjoyment all of you have brought me. So if I've butchered your plot lines while doing that, I'm very sorry. That you can't appreciate my god tier writing. I hope you all enjoyed my deeply overcomplicated, over-glorified fanfic, and remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory.